nakuphi emakhaya amadolobheni asekumplasta khona lapho ubukela khona SABC 1 lelo ke lihlelo lakho ilungelo lakho it's your right siyakade maphambili ku SABC 1 Mzansi for sure satfolakala futhi na ku SABC Plus siyathemba ukuthi umbukele ke ungcebelekile niphumlile niya enjoy futhi ke nama holiday abo Christmas. Today we'll take stock on how our progressive consumer rights laws are a lived experience in the lives of consumers. Imithetho nemisebenzi with inhlangano etivikela ke malungelo akho njengemthengi ayakusebenzela yini. And now to take stock of the consumer rights landscape, the gains, the challenges. Nekuthi ke yini lekumele ukuthi kwendiwe kuvikela ke emalungelo ebathengi eNingizimu Afrika asimukele ke Thezi Mabuza lomele iNational Consumer Commission siphindze sibe na Kwanda Vabaza lomele iSouth African Banking Ombudsman samukele ke na Akhona Mata lobuya National Credit Regulator. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Siyabonga. As I've mentioned, namhlanje we're just taking stock on the year that was. Nekuthi ke umnyaka wa 2023 ubenjani ke emalungelweni ebantfu nekuthi ke yini imithetho lekumele ishintshwe yini imithetho leshintshiwe nekuthi ke kulabo ke labashayele ke esakeni ngumalini lebuye emakhikhini ebantfu. Ngicela ngawe ke maketheze ukuthi usichazele ukuthi ingabe umnyaka wa 2023 ubenjani in terms of ma consumer rights.
Mnyaka ka 2023 kithi njenge National Consumer Commission ube mhle kakhulu ngoba sithole ukuthi nawubuka nje nasikhuluma ngema contracts siye sahlaziya kabandana nje especially ama contract lehambisana nema cell phone lapha la siyasathola khona umphumelelo omhle kakhulu especially against iVodacom lapha besikhuluma ngema cancellation penalties kanti futhi lokukhona futhi we also did progress nasikhuluma ngama prepaid bookings lapha sithola kusibani laba bebabooke boma hotel, let's say boma hotel nabo ma wedding nga 2021 na 2020 where in beba cancela ngesikhathi se COVID lapha umnyendi labo azanke nje bathola lithuba lokuthi babuyiselwe imali yabo. So we had progress lapha uthola ukuthi tribunal ruled in our favor. Those people though ngiloko besikuthi force majeure. That means ukuthi any other situation beyond the consumer and the supplier, but then the tribunal uyawarula ukuthi I consumer normally takes the precedence ngoba supplier normally has ama insurances against such issues. Kanti futhi lesikutholile ukuthi kuma warranties nasikhuluma ngema warranties nama ma warranties especially the 6 months warranty against the 3 months warranty kuma services. Kuloko ke sesathola imphumelelo emihle especially nasisenga timova and all that wherein we had a number of success stories lapha lokhanza ukuthi ema suppliers kanjalo they were forced ekutheni they should refund ama consumers see interpret futhi nale warranty ukuthi I warranty leya ka 6 months yende kanjani ukuthi ngalesinye isikhathi ukhanza ukuthi especially some of our cases wherein ukhanza ukuthi the supplier would actually stall until kufike lo 3 years, but then sikwatile ukukhombisa ukuthi if the supplier stalls and then I consumer yamtshela ukuthi no I want my car repaired and then the supplier stalls and then if we can prove ukuthi even if the consumer ended up taking the car somewhere else ukuthi lungisiwe the supplier was still responsible. So ngiloko ke ma warranties ama cancellation of ama warranty elona ama cancellation ema contract kanzi futhi nama prepaid bookings ngiloko lesikutholile ku 2023.
Namshengo ngiyeva ukhuluma ngema success stories. Obviously dikhona ke nama stories la ngekho mnanzi like the sad stories when it comes to the consumer. What are some of those? Nekuthi ke yini lokungendiwa to make lives of consumers much better?
Hey, lokho lesibenako ukuthi nasi lokusikhuluma ngemalungelo ebathengi ukuthi abantu labanyenti then they came to understand ukuthi they can complain. But lokho lesinako ke kithi lesikubonile especially ku CPA it's the rate of response. Sikhanza ukuthi abantu labaningi they complain but then we don't have the capacity to respond to them. Umthengi nakafika kuwa complain they want to respond there and then a quick respond and all that. We realize ukuthi with the manual processes la lesibenabo our response was very slow. Kanzi futhi lesinako interpretation lokho lesikubita ukuthi jurisdiction between ama provincial consumer protectors nathi as National Consumer Commission because umuntu nakahlala asathe uhlala eDayizenze eWhite River uya complain awuthenge khona lapho ku spa That would mean ukuthi wena njengemthengi nesitolo nisedvude. That would mean ukuthi your supplier noma le regulator lele kumele exceed yaseMpumalanga. Nangabe kuyendeka ukuthi you cannot get recourse. So our laws lesinye isikhathi lesikubonile ukuthi they did not distinguish ukuthi nangabe really in particular you and the supplier are in the same province. They would say ukuthi the jurisdiction noma the main office lokho kwenda ukuthi balaleli noma bathengi badideke because ngalesinye isikhathi that would mean that they will complain directly to us because let's say bathenge iphone and then the bigger supplier office lakhe lila eGauteng kanzi uyithenge kuphi eDysons. So lokho kwenda ukuthi then that issue the cloud ukuthi ngicomplaina kuphi kubani bese kuthatha isikhashana. So ngiloko lekusibona ukuthi embeleni kumele sikushintshe.
Cha yevakala. Kwanda, what are some of the big issues that lehhovisi lenu leyichachile noma ke that they had to deal with?
I think Tina, from our side and from 2022, 2023, same issue, fraud. So we see a lot of fraud and digital. The more innovations in banking and Zeka, the more abantu bafala victim to scams. So we've seen a lot of scams happening, and we also see a lot of people not understanding their rights when it comes to credit. Yes. So we obviously deal with a lot of those, and in some of the issues that we've abantu, for instance, they never understood ukwenzakalani. For instance, if umuntu yeza ati bane court order bafuna uthatha imoto yakho repossessions of imoto, which was obviously one of the big issues that we identified in 2023. So people began understand that actually not just anyone ongaza kuwo azothatha imoto. So yeah, so we tried to explain to people that it can only be the sheriff of the court with an original court order. Okay. So we obviously faced a lot of those, and a lot of people were complaining and not understanding exactly what they can actually refuse if umuntu nje uza a mall or a car wash azothatha imoto yakho and they do not have original court orders, and they not the sheriff. So we saw those, and we also obviously dealt with a lot of prescription complaints. So umuntu where they do not understand what if they've not been paying for more than 3 years and
debt prescribed.
Exactly, not paying, and you've never acknowledged awukaze uthole call it uyakolota uthi nawe yebo ngiyavuma ngiyakolota. If awukaze wathola any of those things and you've never made a payment, then if that is prescribed. But people do not understand.
We'll talk about that in a moment, but I just want to find out from you, you did mention begnema scams, most of the issues that you had to deal with. What have you uncovered? Nitfole ukuthi bantu are gullible, or the banking systems or the security systems are weak?
So it's actually both. So in some instances, we've identified here some banking systems, for instance, they are not up to the level that they should be. And because of that, then it's easy for consumers out there to fall victim. So one of the major issues in 2023 we dealt with and engaged some banks on was digital wallet scams. Now, it's a simple, and understand it's convenient to make a payment anyway. It's very, very convenient. But it's also very, very convenient for fraudsters, because what happened was a fraudster, and we saw a lot of these transactions as Enzega in Dubai, and Enzega in Spain, and you here when I South Africa, you've never visited Loma country now, but the card Lakho has been around. I mean, they tapping your credit card, because what happens is, we're not in Spain. You can go with Apple Pay, for instance, or register your information. Then you steal card information. You're someone like South Africa, and I mean there is a lot of there is a syndicate operator around here in South Africa. So they steal those card details. Then, if you sell someone there in Spain, and then that person in Spain enters your credit card information. So they tap your phone. So our biggest issue that we had as the Ombudsman for Banking Services was, as a consumer, when you receive SMS, the only thing SMS actually you are linking a device. Right. It doesn't, you agreeing to link a device does not mean what you also agreeing with payments can be made with the phone.
Okay.
Those are two different things. So it doesn't tell you that. So we had a lot of issues regarding that, and fortunately all the banks agreed with our view and all refunded all the people who suffered victims.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Akhona, I just want us to, I want you to take us through my issues that you had to deal with.
Thank you Simphiwe. Ku 2023 siye saba nengxaki kakhulu ye debt review without consent. Sine complaints ezininzi kakhulu apha abantu bafona khona bathi baye bafakwa ke kwingcebiso zamatyala. Bangakhumbuli ke nalo debt counselor leyo yamfonela yamfaka ku debt counselling. Kakhulu ke siye siqaphela ba as debt counselors zibuya from the Western Cape. Inamba yawufike ngu-021 athi umuntu hayi ndiye ndafowunelwa kwathiwa ndizocinyelwa amatyala okanye bazondincedisa ukuhlawula amatyala wami.
Kanti le debt review process, doesn't it involve the actual consumer? No, ayidzingi ini input yakhe.
It does. Remember, when it comes to debt review, when as a consumer, you need to go and approach a debt counselor to say, ndinengxaki yamatyala, ingathi bazorepossess indlu yam, okanye bazorepossess imoto. Ngokomthetho ke i-debt counselling lena iye i-protect against i-repossessions easy. Ideally, i-debt review bemele isebenza kanjalo. Kodwa ke sinengxaki ye-debt counselors ezi-approacha abantu zibafonele through i-call center agents zabo, ziba-entice ke, ezinye ziye zibaxoxela nobaxoxela. Kuthi hayi siyabona ngurhulumente okanye usebenzela urhulumente, you are being overcharged on interest rates. Thina siyi-debt counsel ethile singakuncedisa uba ubhatale about 60% off from your actual installments. Ngokufuna usave ke imali ke kwabathengi baphela bevuma bengazazi lento bazifaka kuyo. Xa yoboleka imali endaweni ethile kuthi hayi awuqualify kaloku kukho into ekhoyo egameni lakho. Babuye ke ngibaze bathi hayi man bendiyoboleka imali endaweni ethile kuthiwa kune flag egameni lami. Inoba yiflag etheni lini. Ngokujonga kwethu ke xa simanzi ba hayi ufakwe phansi kwengcebiso zamatyala. Ndifuna ke abathengi bayimamele ke lento Simphiwe uba i-debt counselling ngeyabantu abasokola ukuzihlawulela amatyala wabo. That means udinga ukuncediswa i-registered counselor. Debt counselor. I-debt counselors ke zibhaliswe nathi kunye okanye zibhaliswe kunye nathi ngokomthetho i-National Credit Act number 34 2005. Just to take you through i-debt counselling lena as a process. I-debt counselling iye yafika ke ngo-2007 as an intervention yokuncedisana nabantu abasokola ukuhlawula amatyala. You are in a verge of losing your house. Imagine paying for 18 years. Kulonyaka wesibini mhlambi kuhliswa isalaries emsebenzini. You are paying for imoto kulonyaka wes6 wokugqibela emsebenzini kuhliswa isalaries. They want to repossess your car.
Okay, so I wanted to hold that thought. Ngoba ngifuna sichubeka nalo kumlele crew after the break because nyalo kumele sobhadala tikwene debt the SABC.
All right.
Asibabe lapho ke mbukele sisishelele ngasethitolo sobhadala tikwene debt fu sineke silungelo lakho ungasanyakade siyabuya khona nyalo. Welcome back, Sanibukela futhi Mbukele. We continue our discussion today. We're just taking stock about the year that was, umnyaka wa 2023. Njengoba sesigoqota nje ukuthi ke ngimaphi ke ama issues lathinza wena njengemthengi ukuthi ke tinhlangano letahlukehlukene lapha eMzansi letikhuluma ke noma ledzingitsa tindzaba tebathengi ukuthi yini tindzaba lebatidzingitsile ngitiphi tinkinga lebaticatululile takho wena njengemthengi. We have our guest this afternoon and siyachubeka nawe ke Akhona. I quite like how you articulated yourself in terms of just taking us through some of the big issues ikakhulukati i-debt review. Let's go back a bit. Le debt review yini isebenza kanjani? How does it help consumers bati free from i-debt?
Okay Simphiwe, njengoba sesisatsho i-debt review lena i-process ethi yafika ngo-2007 ukuqinisekisa ke ukuba incedisana nabathengi abahluleka ukuhlawula amatyala wabo. Xa ungena kwi-debt review lena ke uye uncedakala ukuba impahla zakho zingathinjwa, that is repossessions. Ngokungena kwakho ukhuselekile. Ithi lento ke ngoku ungena phansi kwengcebiso zamatyala ukwazi ba uhlawula amatyala wakho kancinci for a longer period of time so that you can save your assets from repossessions. Ideally ke i-debt review bekumele isebenza kanjalo, but in practice we've seen i-abuse by i-debt counselors eziqalisa ke u-approacha i-consumers. Bathi bafuna ubanceda ke baphume ematyaleni ube ungenalo nelo tyala ke ngenxa yoba ufuna usave imali uzibone sewungenile ngoba kaloku uthenjisiwe uba you can save about 60% of your installments.
Kanjani usave kanjani?
Usave kanjani ngoba kaloku ubhatala kancinci i-installments. Kule 10,000 ubuyihlawula ngenyanga, i-debt counselor lena must go and approach your creditors to say uAkhona uyasokola ukuhlawula amatyala akhe, sicela noko nimhlisele abhatale half of the amount over a longer period. Ideally bekumele njalo, but sizoqhubeka i-interview ihambe.
Okay, so nikhonile ukucatulula lenzaba lenjalo.
Siyazama
Debt review without consent.
Yes, we do receive cases of debt review without consent through our investigations and enforcement department. Recently, we had to clamp down on these unscrupulous debt counsellors based in Cape Town. We've had this year over 40 raids kwezi companies ezenza izinto ezirongo, including credit providers ezibolekisa ngemali zingabhaliswanga kusemthethweni. So we are clamping on this. We are trying as much as we can uqinisekisa uba noko abantu bakuthi bakhuselekile.
Okay, Mshengo, thina ke ma-consumer ke nebathengi singazivikela kanjani ekutheni sishayeleke sakeni in particular by ama-suppliers?
Lokhu lesinako nje, especially as ungumthengi, what we want you to do ukuthi know your rights, but lekubalulekile ukuthi keep evidence, especially nangabe uthengile, know from whom uthengeni, nini, ukhokhe malini, because anything thina as i-National Consumer Commission, njengoba nathi ukuthi we are a creature of statute, that would mean ukuthi nangabe kumele sithathe idzaba lakho siye e-tribunal, kumele sibe nabo ubufakazi bokuthi wena you had a relationship with a supplier, uthenge lokhu nganasi isikhathi, ngoba nasikhuluma ngema 6 months warranty and all that would mean ukuthi kumele sibe ne-evidence yokuthi imoto yakho then iphuke ngasiphi isikhathi, uyithenge nini, yase iphuka nini, wendani kuloko. So that is what is important. Athi ukuthi what are your rights and what is the evidence lekumele ube nayo. Mara lekubalulekile ukuthi wathi ukuthi ucomplain akubani kanjani, ngoba lesikubonile futhi ukuthi mostly ama-consumers kuyaye ukuthi nakube nema-problem bacale nje vele baye ku-social media. Thina sade especially nangabe then uyacomplain ukuthi ngithenge imova or ngithenge lekuthide maybe kudla nasi isitolo, and we get that ku-social media. Sure. And then we would say to a consumer, come to us, let's give us evidence of uthengeni kubani. Then it's wherein we get a problem ukuthi most of our consumers wethu, they will be on social media but not really complain to the right platform with the evidence that supports lokule bakushoko.
Okay. All right. Kwanda, just continuing our discussion on how consumers can actually protect themselves from unscrupulous suppliers and service providers. Ngifuna ukuthi sichubeke ngale ndzaba loyitsinzile earlier on about the banking scams. Say namuhla ngiyabhadala noma ke ngithenga lutho online, online shopping, ngifaka ama credit card details, CVV number and everything. So how sure am I ukuthi lawo ma details lawo angeke baphinze bawasebenzise in future kuthola imali yami, even if I did not make any purchase?
No. So it's very difficult actually ukwenza sure ukuthi for instance lo muntu omnikeza these details or the company that oyinikeza these details, they will never use them. So we do not know, you do not know. But as an extra step or extra protection, into eyenzakalayo ukuthi now for any purchase oyenzayo online kune OTP oyifumanayo when as a customer. So the OTP is okutshela straight ukuthi you are now making a purchase for X amount gupi. So if you receive that when as a customer, then you know what someone is making a purchase by your card information, and you know what when that transaction, then there's a duty on you as a customer to immediately report to e-bank yako for them to stop the transaction and cancel your card.
So ngalama feature ke, yeah, so ngalama feature, the only security feature ngile OTP ukuthi ke angeke ngichubeke ngale transaction ngingakafaki le OTP le ngayitfola ku cell phone yami.
Correct, but it does happen with the transaction. People do make purchases, for instance, without receiving a OTP. Okay. But again, there is a protection. About MasterCard, about Visa rules, benza bayibiza a chargeback. So as a customer, you'll have a chargeback right on fraud. So you can go and complain with, this was a fraudulent transaction, and then you'll have a chargeback right. E-bank yako will assist you with that chargeback. So a chargeback is basically the bank contacting the bank where you made the payment. So they will go and contact that bank to say, but our customer says they never authorized this transaction. So ask your customer to provide proof that it is a valid transaction. If that customer does not provide that proof or does not respond within a certain period of time, then your bank immediately refunds the money to you. So that's how a chargeback works. If there is no OTP and it's fraudulent, your bank will refund the money.
Okay.
So that's how it works. But I also wanted to just touch on something Akhona said.
Yeah, sure.
which is very, very important when it comes to debt review. I think a lot of people bayahlala without, for instance, answering, because we see that credit providers will try and call, make contact to say, listen, your account is in areas and all that, in Thezi Njalo. Or they send you letters to tell you which your account is in areas, but people, they avoid those letters and do not do anything. Unfortunately, once summons have been issued, unfortunately, debt review will never work. So option yokuya ku debt review after summons or legal action has started, there's no longer that option. So it is definitely to the advantage of my customer to make sure that if they see what they in financial distress, before legal action even starts, they go buy my credit providers, what are the options available for me now, who's struggling now to make my payment.
So ama-summons angeke bakhona ukwa-reversa lapho?
No. So it's very, very rare. Again, it's possible. The bank has a discretion, or the credit provider in a discretion to say, yes, we will reverse and enter into whatever arrangement with the person, but it's rare. Because if bazamile contact and when you constantly avoid then when they do decide to take illegal action by issue summons, remember now there's lawyers involved, there's lawyer fees that now as a customer was added to your account. So all those things they take into account, and then if that's we reverse those summons, as a customer, you're still responsible to make payments for the legal fees with the lawyers that they instructed. So customers just need to be aware, better, you know what you can't afford to make payments. Go to your credit provider, make arrangements. Do not wait for legal summons to start and legal action to, yeah.
So law arrangement now, does it have to do with debt review, or is it something different from a debt review? And this is one of the nicest things the National Credit Act introduced. That section 129 letter that each and every credit provider has to now send to you as a customer. Yes, it are those options. You can go or complain with the ombuds, you can go under debt review. All those options are corner with that letter. But if when now you decide not to go open that letter, then you won't know of the options are available. Okay. So, and like I'm saying, if summons have been issued, unfortunately, then there is no longer an option about payment arrangement or summons. All right. No, hasishiye lapho ke sicubeke sitawuchuba inkulumo yethu emva kwelikhefu. For now, let's take another commercial break. Please do join us after this. Yilungelo Lakho. Khumbula ukuthi ke lihlelo lanamuhla alusakadwa bukhoma. It's a recorded program. Kungako ke singakwadi ukuthatha incingo tenu. But you can touch base with us on our social media platforms. Namhla ke sikhuluma ke sibuyela emuva, sikhuluma ke indaba letebathengi, consumer issues that we had to grapple with, and just taking stock of the year that was in the consumer space. Now, Akhona, I want us to go to Kubega and just weigh in on what Vabaza had said in terms of, some of the steps before debt review. Before a consumer undergoes the process of debt review, what are some of those steps or processes?
Thank you, Simphiwe. Debt review at times can be a very exhaustive process. As the NCR, we always advise consumers to exhaust other avenues first. In terms of interventions, esinazo ikhona into esiyibiza ngoba i-debt rescheduling. Apho xa uzibona ngathi uyoyisakala kukuhlawula amatyala wakho, you can go and approach your creditor to say, le 1,500 benifuna ndiyibhatale for the next 4 years, ingathi izandohlula, sendini ezinye commitments. Ndicela mhlambe ndibhatale 750 for 48 months. That is through a longer period of time. It's not a very formal process. You go to your bank and you negotiate to pay lower installments over a longer period of time. You don't need debt counselors. You don't need lawyers. Go in a bank yako, you negotiate. In that manner, you don't commit to any legal proceedings. Number two, kukhona section 127 esiyasemsebenzise we National Credit Act, surrender of assets. Uba unale moto uqonda le moto leni ngathi izothathwa in the next few months because andizokwazi ubhatala. Why not surrender this vehicle ingeka lose mhlambi value, because installments zami zonke zi up to date. You can take it back to the financer abayithengisa kwi auction and cover ityala lakho. sifuna ke abaphulaphula okanye ababukeli baqale ba-exhauste all those options before bangene kwi-debt review. I-debt review ke mna ke ndithanda ukuthi yisebenzise njenge-intervention yokugqibela. Ndithanda ukuyifanisa nomuntu osebenzisa iziyobisi apho sewufuna uncedo kumele uthathwe usiwe e-rehab. I-debt counselling lena ke siye siyifanise ne-rehab yamatyala. Uzame zonke indlela zokuhlawula amatyala wakho awukwazanga ngokuhlulekile at all, uyaphangela but isalary yakho is not enough to cover any other commitments. Ithi loo nto ke ngoku go under debt counselling to save ii-assets zakho from repossession, as long as uyazi uba uzokwazi ungena kuyo. Bayakhala ke abantu bangena bengazi bathi hayi andisakwazi ukuphuma ngoku le nto bendingene ndicinga uba into ezondilungela ngoku ndiphuma njani. So sifuna abantu bayazi uba i-debt counselling lena yintoni and ii-implications zayo yintoni.
Okay. Now Mshengu, from what you've covered, nawubuka ke nawuthatha kubuka ureflector imithetho yebathengi, the consumer laws la eMzansi, who do they favor really? Do they favor the suppliers or service providers? Do they favor the consumers noma ke bathengi?
Ngingathi kuyo yonke lemithetho lekhona kahle hle mthengi is in the middle. Munye ke lo lesibukelela yena, because now ubuka nje starting from even good debt review ufike ku consumer protection, it's all about wena njengemthengi. But lekubalulekile ngwadi ukuthi what are the pitfalls, and then now uthenga noma na ungena wenda i-transaction ngena uvule mehlo, especially njengema contracts njengoba sesathi ukuthi nje kuwo wonke ama contracts lokhu lekufunakalako ukuthi wena njengemthengi wathi ukuthi utfaka kuphi kanjani. But lekubalulekile futhi ukuthi no ukuthi ungabi coerced uthi kufole ungazi ukuthi wena you have to now sign the contract namhla manje ungayifunzanga kahle. So ngiloko ke mthetho nje ebathengi ilinzele nje uyibekele nje ukuthi I protect wena njengemthengi. That's what we have said.
So akhona nema amendments locabanga ukuthi kumele endiwe noma ke lishintsho loluthite kumele lwendiwe kule mithetho yema consumers?
Yebo kubalulekile nje, we always look at le thinking lesibhekene nato leqala nje especially ku National Consumer Protection Act lesikubukile i-issue ye jurisdiction ukuthi in all the suppliers of South Africa we are actually not a what we call a federal state. So we are a unified state. That would mean ukuthi ayikho i-supplier that will exclusively work eMpumalanga noma eNorthern Cape unless ngabe it's a corner shop. So ngiloko ke le issue ye jurisdiction kuya ngema provinces, we think ukuthi it was not well thought. Lekhona futhi lesikubonile besiloku sikhuluma ngetinto tema pricing and fair prices and all that, imali intengo ye petrol that normally keeps on increasing. Ko our Consumer Protection Act, we are a what we call a free market country. That would mean ukuthi asi-interfere nema prices. Marna sesibuka ku Consumer Protection Act kukhuluma nge-unfair pricing, but then the term it's not defined. So angeke sisho ukuthi no umuntu langathengisa amazambane nangabe wathengisa nga-20 rand per kilogram, lo munye wathengisa nga-13 rand, ukuthi le price yakhe unfair because asina a comparator noma a yardstick lekhulumako ukuthi le price unfair nayende njani. So that is another area that we also wanted to check. Kanzi futhi lokunye lesinako ukuthi manje sibonile nje bantwana bafa nje buthaphuthaphu ngekudla, maybe kudla lokhu lesikubita kuthi ku expired and all that. Sibona ukuthi uma sikhuluma nge-consumer protection kumele kube khona lokhu lokucacisiwe ukuthi nasikhuluma especially ngekudla ngibani lo lekumele abhekane nje aqonzane nekudla, because it's a very commodity lele mobile ngoba ihambisana ne agriculture kuphinde futhi kube environmental affairs kanti nakukhulunywa nge-recall kusuke kube ngithi. So bathenge abathi nje kahle hle ukuthi no nangene esitolo ngithenga, who is responsible for the let me say the store itself. And then nangabe sekuyakhicithwa, who is responsible ekutheni lama biscuit lengiwathengile akahambisane nema standard. Nangabe sekasukile kumkhiciti then sekase store, who has to ensure ukuthi le store safe nekudla bakuphatha kahle. So we wanted maybe ukuthi nangabe sesiyabuka akucaciswe ukuthi nakukhulunywa ngekudla, who is the regulator responsible. Kanzi-ke ku-Consumer Protection Act akucace ukuthi sicalaphi siphelelepi nakukhuluma especially ngema-prices ekudla njalo.
Okay. Now, Kwanda, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Umvile Thezi lapha uthi i-consumer is in the middle of yonke ke imithetho that concern ama-consumer rights and consumer laws lapha eMzansi. Lomunye ke could argue ukuthi on the issue of prescription, the one that you touched on earlier, ukuthi lo mthetho loyo ufavor ema-suppliers noma ke ema-service providers. Because nangabe i-service provider noma i-supplier izama kuthola kushayela i-consumer angamtholi because of change of address, because of change of contact details, and then kuphela lo 3 years solo bazama kumthinta bangamtholi, and then bese ke bayaluza. So what would you say to that?
So Mina, my view on legislation, especially consumer protection legislation, is not more to give protection to consumers. I think it's more to try and provide a balance.
Okay.
Yes, between consumers and credit providers. Because previously, obviously, without the consumer protection laws, credit providers, they're too powerful. They're too powerful. They decided on the interest previously before the NCA. They would give people interest, which is huge.
But
and
do the prescription laws give that balance that you talk about?
Yes, prescription laws. I think what normally happened was without prescription, and again, the NCA introduced now in 126B a new provision when it comes to prescription.
Yeah.
But a prescription, important a prescription is, if, for instance, a debt doesn't prescribe, it doesn't prescribe after 3 years. In terms of is, I'm credit providers, they sit back, because you're not paying. Then areas interest and then when they do decide to proceed with illegal action, then you're now owing a huge amount of money which you can't pay. You could not pay when it was little. Now saying you can't pay it. But the prescription is there to obviously try and mitigate against debt just growing and growing and growing. It's not just prescription again. There is induplum as well. Induplum now, for instance, if you owe 1 rand, you can't owe then 1 rand 1 cent. It can't be exactly. But again, the NCA into ANs even more important, and again to try and bring the balance is it does because previously prescription induplum, for instance, would only cater for interest areas interest, but with the NCA it's not just areas interest. So now about, for instance, other fees and charges, about insurance, everything that is added to the school. So all those things now can't be more than 2 times, for instance, but to answer you on the prescription, yes, prescription for me, it does provide a balance.
It does provide a balance.
Exactly, and it does provide a protection to consumers.
Okay, asibambe lapho ke. Mbukeli, sisishile ngasetitolo hlala kanye nathi leli lungelo lakho ungasanyakali. Sikomukela futhi mbukeli, khumbula ukuthi ke namhla asisakade bukhoma. Ngaloko ke we will not be able to take your calls unfortunately during this show, but you can interact with us on our social media platforms. Akuba futhi nenzaba, and before we wrap the show, ngifuna ukuthi sichubeke ukuthi lihovisi lenu, what are some of the issues when it comes to reckless lending by banks and financial service providers that you have to deal with?
Thank you, Simphiwe. Maybe firstly, for the benefit of consumers, sicacise ukuthi i-reckless lending yini. I-reckless lending lena kukubolekisa ngemali ngokungakhathali. Number 1, umnayezi Akhona Mata ndiyile bank ndiyoboleka imali. They did not conduct affordability assessment to see uba le mali lena ndiyibolekayo ndizokwazi na ukuyihlawula back. That is to check my expenses, nditya malini ngenyanga, i-transport yam imalini, abantwana, i-maintenance, kunye nezinye izinto. If the bank or the credit provider fails to conduct that affordability assessment, then we consider that as reckless lending. And also, if bendinamatyala benikwazi ukwahlawula each and every month, then ndaboleka imali kunelityala litsha ke ngoku likhokhelela ukuba la matyala madala ndingakwazi ukwahlawula. That becomes reckless lending as well. And also, if ndiyoboleka imali, I did not understand the cost, i-risk yoboleka imali and other terms and conditions, that becomes reckless lending. Ixhaphake kakhulu ke reckless lending, especially Banks nje zonke ne-credit providers, because they fail to do this affordability assessment to see uba abantu bakuthi bayakwazi na okanye bazokwazi ukubuyisa le mali. But ke abathengi ezi zinto exeshini elinintsi asizazi. We always say if you suspect uba ubolekwe imali by any credit provider ngongakhathali, then you can actually report those things to us. There have been several cases that we cannot divulge now, as the niggas are still sitting before the court. Apho i-banks ziye zaboleka abantu imali ngongakhathali. But in any case, zonke i-cases esiye sidile nazo as NCR, because sisebenza nge-National Credit Act le unumber 34 2005 ebesethula ukwanda umsebenzi wethu kuqinisekisa uba siyakukhusela njengomboleki okanye njengomuntu osebenzisa amatyala. Kodwa ke also we need to check kwi-reckless lending uba ngubani lo orongo between umboleki nombolekisi. There have been cases ze-consumers apho kumuntu afike anganyaniseki xa ezoboleka le mali and collude with the bank just to qualify for el tyala. Akhona utya malini ngenyanga, hayi expenses zam zokutya it's 500 rand. There's no way kule economy you can
a family of 6 people.
Family of 6 people.
What's 500 rand? 500
rand. Emsebenzini wenza njani? Hayi ndiyawoka because emsebenzini kukufuphi. Unaba abantwana, no, I don't have any kids. Uzama ukunganyaniseki so that you can qualify for el tyala. Then at the end of the day awusakwazi ukuhlawula imali because
so lokho would it constitute as reckless lending leyo lokuthi i-bank did not verify those claims that you made?
Eyona nto yokuqala siyijongayo Simphiwe xa si-investigate i-suspicion of reckless lending is to go to the bank to check the forms ezigcwalisiweyo so that we can identify uba ngubani orongo between the two. Because you can't really identify uba umuntu utya malini ngenyanga because aziveli mhlawumbi kwi-bank statement. Remember bafuna i-bank statement for 3 months, your pay slip for 3 months. So indaba zokutya, your transport issues aziveli. But if cell phone contracts, your medical aid and others, then you can prove those things through documents ezisubmitwe. So sifuna abantu ke nabo banyaniseke xa beyoboleka le mali. Imagine you qualified for ityala le 100,000, uzobhatala 6,000 for the next 4 or 5 years. Now uyakwazi ukubhatala kwinyanga yokuqala fasibhanti kwinyanga yesibini awusakwazi at all because you lied from inception. Yes. So zikhona i-cases ezinjalo siye safumana ke okanye senze referrals to i-National Consumer Tribunal in the past apho ke siye sarula in favor of consumers because the bank failed to conduct the affordability assessment.
Okay. Yes. Okay, Mshengu, would you like to comment?
Yeah, that is kind of like Giti, what we are seeing from the NCC side in terms of ama issues really that we feel ukuthi they have to come to the fore. Izinto esifuna ukuzenza ngcono, especially for ama consumers kanjalo, it's around the issue njengoba sisho izinto zama contracts. Cancellation of contracts. As he was speaking, the one thing that also I should think about that is nasikhuluma ngebathengi, especially nasithathe ma cell phone contract. Lokho lesikhanzile ukuthi bantu abafuna cancela linyendi labo, they would be saying we can't afford. And then what they do as well ukuthi abanikete imthengisi that opportunity ya a month because bebafasel band, especially because bekafuna life cell phone lensha lele flipako. So in that case as well you kanza ukuthi then they can't afford as well. So le issue ema cancellation, le issue ya affordability nasikhuluma nje nge consumer protection sibona nje ukuthi ngazi ukuthi kuyahambisana sikweleti nema goods. But lekhona nje lekubalulekile nguwe nje njengemthengi ukuthi bana neliqiniso in all the time. Thatha isikhathi sakho wathi ukuthi will I afford or will I not?
Okay.
Yeah.
And speaking of affordability, Kwanda, ngiyabona ngathi ufuna you want to weigh in on that.
Yes. So I think nathi into esibonile ukuthi people baba confused ukuthi reckless lending when is it iqala nini reckless lending? Reckless lending iba at the date when you go and that affordability assessment iyenziwa. So if for instance bakunikeza namuhla isikoloto sakho you could afford leso sikoloto, then a week later uhambe uyoboleka futhi enye imali, then because of that you can't afford now to pay. You can't come and say this one for instance was reckless. So that's one. And two, if uzohamba uyocomplain nge reckless lending, it has to, you can't go for instance, after 3 years from that date. So if it's 3 years, say, then unfortunately, the NCA says then you can't raise defense or complaint reckless lending. And Tina, for instance, at the banking ombudsman, for instance, with prescription and reckless lending, involving imoto, for instance. People think then because there was reckless lending or there is a prescription, therefore imoto then automatically ownership passes game. Unfortunately, umthetho awusebenzi kanjalo until ubhadale sonke isikoloto sale moto. Imoto remains the property of bank. Ownership, yes, remains with the bank. They the title holders are that the papers, the notice documents. So you can have the motor, but it's not your car and you can't sell it. So the law says then, obviously, bank, you can either return the motor back to e-bank, or if refusing we sell a back motor, then they will take illegal action. And again, goes back to the old story, which now you're going to be liable for the legal fees. In 2023, we saw a lot of those people thinking, because the debt has prescribed, therefore, motor unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Okay. So has the banking ombudsman ever had to rule on a case of reckless lending in cases where the consumer lied about his affordability? So who made the determination? Would the consumer lied or the bank recklessly lended the consumer?
So yes, we do look at those, but again, so if, for instance, you as a consumer, obviously there is documentation about but where they completed the affordability and all that. If we see what you lied, for instance, on the living expenses, you lied about that, then it is a complete defense. The National Credit Act says it is a complete defense for the credit provider. Then you can't then raise reckless lending when yourself you lied about it.
Okay.
Unless if obviously then the bank was in a position to go and verify that information, and they didn't. If they didn't and they could have, then it is still reckless lending.
Okay. Please do join us after this. We'll be right back. Welcome to our very final segment. And I want us, as we wrap up the show, whose responsibility is it? In as much as I will feel the brunt because
Simphiwe, we can talk about the rights kuze kube ngomso, but eyona nto kubaluleke kakhulu ababukeli okanye abantu abathenga ngamatyala kumele baqinisekise uba they protect their own rights.
Yes.
And also it is their responsibility to ensure uba bathethe inyani every time they apply for izinto. Ityala liyadura kakhulu. We've seen ngo-2022 i-repo rate was sitting at 4%, but now seyinyuke kakhulu. Abantu abaninzi abasawa afford amatyala. Recently, Simphiwe, we issued statistics sibiza ngoba i-Consumer Credit Market Report, apho ibonisa uba abantu abaninzi up to 27.05 million eSouth Africa banamatyala, and out of those people only 17 million are able to pay amatyala wabo on time and in full each and every month. Ujonge ke ngoku le 10 million lena engakwazi ukuhlawula amatyala wabo, because kungenzeka mhlawumbi kudala they lied about the expenses zabo, now they are defaulting on amatyala wabo, abasakwazi ubhatala ngexesha, abasakwazi ubhatala in full, they are victims of repossessions, and also they are gullible to indaba ye-debt review because bafuna uncedakala baphume ematyaleni. So as umntu oboleka imali, make sure every time uboleka imali, be honest about expenses zakho. Akekho umuntu otya 300 rand ngenyanga, a family of 6 people. Most of the time sihlala kude emsebenzini, siyakhwela, sinabantwana, sibhatala izikolo. We need to be honest and ensure uba si protect amalungelo wethu.
Okay. Mshengo?
Yeah. And kuloko bekasicatha kukusho manje, we found ukuthi there's also a pattern kokuthi namuntu anesikweleti, then le mova lela kayithengile, it will always have ama problems. That would mean ukuthi utawuvele nje asho ukuthi no i-gearbox ayisebenzi noma sibuko sesiphukile. Lokho kusho ukuthi nangabe sewufuna ukuthi umthengisi ayithathe le mova, what we look at sisuke sibuka kulokhu lekuthi lo complain ngako, is it material na kokuthi le supplier angayithatha le mova and then refund you the cost, because ingilokhu lesikubonile. So now ufika yethu complain ukuthi no imova then ikunikethe problem ayisastart and all that, then would also go back ukuthi now uthengiselwa le mova that they give you all the information. Did you consent kokuthi no vele it is a second hand vehicle, yebo i-gearbox yakhona beyinekuhlupha kancane, nangabe uyithenge vele akutshelile awukwathi kokuthembeni nase uhluleka kubhadala bese uyabuya kithi uthi no vele i-gearbox lena ngifaka ku2 ibangamsindo, because that would not be material. So that would mean ukuthi in terms of now the refund ku Consumer Protection Act yale mova le uyithenge ngesikweleti, now ufuna i-refund, it has to be a material defect lo ngatshelwanga ngayo leyendeka within the 6 months period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, njoba sesiya kumnyaka wa 2024, I want us to talk about the prospects. How is the year 2024 looking like in terms of the different pieces of legislation, in terms of consumer behavior and just about everything under that space?
Kithi ku Consumer Protection Act we have already bese submitile ku minister simtshela ngaloku letinkinga lesibenato, jurisdiction, issue ye pricing ne issue ye a single regulator, especially nasihambisana netinto tekudla. But lesikubonile futhi ema services ethu. What we have done is ekupheleni kwalomnyaka kwa 2023 siye sathula i-services wherein we are trying to make it easy for my consumer njengawe njengemthengi ekhaya ukuthi file your complaint, ukuthi our response should be as quick as possible, and then you should also get a reference and be able ukuthi ucheck or track ukuthi complaint yakho ihambaphi. We are trying to bring those services to you. And lesikubukile futhi ukuthi next day besibuke ukuthi we will come up with an opt-out registry. Njengoba sathi ukuthi we have a direct marketing and siyathi ukuthi kune POPIA Act and then kune Consumer Protection Act. But ku direct marketing ukuthi mina njengaThezi ngiyaye ngivumelane nelibhangi lami noma lo lengithenge kuye ukuthi you can contact me for direct marketing. Bese uyathatha le number yakho uyiniketa labanye lakasebenzisana nabo. Nase ukhanza ke lo ma services ukuthi no we have insurance lana, we have a funeral service lana, we have a new product, bese uya complain. So le opt-out registry nangabe konke kutawuhamba kahle kusho ukuthi then we get the regulations promulgated, kusho ukuthi maybe somewhere around April utokwathi ukuthi uthathe cell phone number yakho noma email yakho uyiregister kule registry kwendele ukuthi ungasayitfoli ke wena wonke lama SMS leswatfola.
Okay, yeah, we need a separate discussion to talk about that. iPOPI Act ukuthi njengoba seyiphasiwe kepha solo sawatfola lama SMS, we still get those weird phone calls from 087, which the most dreaded number. Now, Kwanda, from your perspective, how is the year 2024 looking like?
Just before I move to 2024, I just needed to just mention one thing that we actually saw not in 2023, especially with abantu who are distressed. We saw a lot of people going, knowing very well that they can't afford, then they go with these unscrupulous car dealerships and then they change bank statements and all that, and they are submitted to the bank to try and apply for vehicle finance. Unfortunately, a lot of those people were caught out and they were registered with the South African Fraud Prevention Services. Now, for 10 years, those people will not be allowed to open a bank account. And
really?
Yes. For 10 years, they will not be able to open a bank account. And these are some of the things now, obviously, besides a criminal case being opened and they be prosecuted. I mean, anyone who's working today needs a bank account. If you cannot have a bank account and you listed with the South African Fraud Prevention Services, your prospects of employment as well will definitely be affected going forward.
Okay.
And then 2024, it's actually a very exciting time for Tina as the Ombudsman for Banking Services, the Credit Ombud, the 2 insurance ombuds as well, because from 2024 onwards, we're now becoming one organization. So the National Financial Ombudsman Scheme of South Africa. So again,
That's a huge achievement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The whole point of this is to try and centralize, obviously, these consumer complaints. So instead of people, because there was a lot of confusion when people, for instance, banks deal with a lot of complaints. It can be insurance, it can be advice, it can be just a lot of things. So now we bring all those things into just one house.
Okay.
So people now no longer have to be confused as to le complaint is this a bank?
True.
But it has to do with credit. Does
Okay.
it go to? So all those complaints now are coming to us, and we're going to deal with those complaints. And again, lastly, the forecast is, again, we still see a lot of people being distressed, and we still see a lot of fraud happening.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights with us.
Oh, thank you.
Siyabonga kakhulu. Hayi-ke kwanyalo mbukeli sesifike emaphethelweni ehlebo lethu namhla ngithe ngibuke ivakashi lethu ngekuba nathi kuze kube manje ngithanza bonga kanye nani babukele ngekuba nathi kuze kube manje sinifisela-ke emaholide laphephile neminyaka lomusha lunempumelelo asihlangane futhi ngesikhathi lesitako lapho mahamba phambili SABC 1 Mzansi for sure ukhumbule futhi siyatfolakala futhi naku-SABC Plus. Mina-ke ngiSimphiwe Ncongwane and the rest of the team sithi-ke enjoy your holidays and wishing you a great 2024. Cheers.
Akhona